Welcome to the XCity Plus podcast, where we ask journalists who are killing it in their fields the who, what, why, where, and when of their careers.
On today's episode, we're chatting with Jane Flanagan, an international journalist who works as the Times Africa correspondent. Jane graduated from City in 1993. She has extensive experience, having worked previously as a freelance journalist, the assistant news editor for the Daily Telegraph, and also as a communications consultant for the United Nations and African NGOs. Hi Jane, how are you doing today?
Everything is fine. It's always just, I'm in news. It's all very unpredictable, and it's either feast or famine. And this week it's very feasty. Too much going on. But it's fine.
Yeah. So when did you realize you wanted to be a journalist?
I don't recall ever not wanting to be a journalist. It was always something that was in my mind, and I couldn't really imagine anyone would want to be anything else. When I was very young, for me, being a journalist meant pretending to read the news, and I used to do a lot of that. And I think I was always quite a natural reporter because I was really nosy and would always be filling in my family about what was going on in the road, things that they hadn't noticed. I was constantly observing people and trying to work out dynamics among grown-ups and what was going on.
Who was your biggest journalist inspiration when you were starting out?
Well, obviously, all you students are much younger than me, so you'll probably have to do a bit of Googling. But one of my favourite films is still Superman 2. And not just because I absolutely loved Terence Stamp, who was one of the baddies, but I loved the Daily Planet newsroom. Mm-hmm. And I loved Lois Lane. And actually, that was the most brilliant thing about that film for me, and still is, the way that the newsroom is depicted, the way that Lois is just the sort of reporter that I really enjoy, someone who's quite arsey, and I think that's a necessary character trait to being a reporter, is that you don't necessarily follow orders if you think you've got better ideas. You don't necessarily acknowledge or respect hierarchy. And actually, when you are on the trail of a really good story, there's not much that will come between you and it. And I think Lois was a total operator. You know, the way she does this incredible plot to try and reveal the identity of Superman in this really, really clever way. And it was when I went into newsrooms for the first time, I realised that, it's full of Loises. Mm-hmm. And actually, it's fine to be that kind of female reporter. You know, you aren't judged for being pushy the way you are maybe in some other professions. It's absolutely a necessary part of doing your job really well, and you're respected for it. So, when I did get into newsrooms and saw that it was full of Lois Lanes, I really felt at home very quickly.
Yeah. And do you have a piece of advice, perhaps, that you could give for up-and-coming journalists?
I think it's really important when you're starting out that you recognise who you are and what your strengths are, and don't worry about what you're not good at. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't really rate myself as a very good writer. For me, it's probably the least interesting thing about what I have to do. Luckily, news reporting is quite formulaic, so good stories do write themselves. It's a cliche, it's absolutely true. And the stories that you struggle to write are the ones where it hasn't quite worked out, or you've been given some task by the desk to make something work. And it really is like, slightly painful birthing process. And the stories you find yourself in that you love, they do write themselves. So I think it's fine. If you're not a great writer, don't worry about that. You're always going to get help from your desk or your editors with that. The most important thing is recognizing your strengths and the things that you really enjoy doing. And that's what you should be doing. So if you're passionate about news, definitely do news. I mean, the idea of reviewing a book or a film absolutely fills me with horror. I would be terrible at that. I mean, I do the odd long magazine piece. You shouldn't be just a one-trick pony. But, please don't send me to interview a celebrity or go to Wimbledon, because I just won't know what to make of that, really. So, just listen and lean into yourself, work out what your passion is, and that's what you should probably be doing. And the other bit of with them is social media. Social media is there as a tool. It's there to find contacts, new voices, see what your rivals are up to. Don't give away your gold on Twitter.
Right.
And don't let it suck you in and get into rows with idiots, because it's just a waste of time.
Mm-hmm. That's really good advice, I think, because especially when you're starting out, there's so much to do, there's so much to master, and sometimes it's not possible to do all that. Why do you love your field of international reporting and journalism?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a reporter, and being the Africa correspondent of the Times is exactly the same job as being a district reporter in East Anglia. You know, it's exactly the same skills and qualities that are needed, which is curiosity about where you are, really good contacts, constantly looking for stories, understanding the context where you are, and making sure you're putting things in an appropriate context and analysing what's going on so you make sense of it to your readers. You know, I'm a reporter, and I just happen to be based in Africa, and I'm really lucky to be in Africa because I feel very at home here. I came to South Africa for the first time in the year 2000, actually as a training spouse. And I didn't really have much interest in becoming a foreign correspondent. I sort of fell into it. But once I realised that it's actually a reporting job, first and foremost, then, you know, I feel really very at home. I always say, you know, a day in the African countries I visited are worth 2 or 3 anywhere else. Life is lived on a very wide bandwidth and with great highs and lows. So it's a really stimulating place to be, and especially as a news reporter, because there's always lots to write about and new places to go, and people are really open to journalism. Right. I know that in the UK, journalists have a bit of a bad rap, and there's a lot of mistrust. I'm happy to say that isn't the case in the countries where I operate, and people are really all over themselves to speak to me, which makes, you know, it a bit like pushing at an open door, which makes my job so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, it seems you're like doing what you love in the country you love, which is truly the ideal situation. Where do you see international reporting going in the future? Are there any trends or movements that we should be looking out for?
Well, one thing I worry about with being in, you know, if you want to go overseas to report, is that the traditional way you would do that would be that people would go to a country that appeals to them, or a story that appeals to them, set themselves up and start pitching ideas. You know, it's really a very expensive business to do these days, and payments for freelancers and expenses and so on really aren't what they used to be. So what I worry about is that only young reporters who've got some sort of financial cushion, the bank of mum and dad, or their own sort of trust or property portfolio, will be afford to do this kind of work. And then I think that's going to mean that a lot of people who would really be good foreign correspondents will be excluded just because of financial reasons. And I think that's a great shame, because also I worry that you're not going to get the right people to do the job. There's a lot of glamour around this, and it does seem like quite an exotic way to work, but actually what it really is all about is hard work and having a passion to do it, and sometimes that doesn't always extend to people who've got the money to be able to afford to do it. I think what I'm hoping to see with international journalism in the future is that we will start bringing in some of the newer technologies. I would like to see more graphics. I'd like to see the use of videos and sort of whizzy whistles and bells sort of stuff that they do at the office in London now. Because I think if we are expecting our readers to pay for our content, and I do believe, you know, there's a place for paywalls, and I'm very supportive that the Times has one, because that pays my salary and helps me to do my job. And I think that people don't mind paying for something that they can't get for free anywhere else. And I think it's really important when we're covering complicated foreign stories that we put it in accurate and useful geographical and historical context. So I'm thinking at the moment about a story I write often, which is Ethiopia. A huge country, a real mosaic of linguistic ethno-groups, very much like the former Yugoslavia. And it's in danger of going the same way as the former Yugoslavia into a bunch of sort of Balkan states. And we're covering a bit about a conflict in Tigray, which is drawn in the neighboring state of Eritrea. How wonderful, wouldn't it, if we could really present to our readers how we arrived at this point. I think that readers don't just want a daily digest of massacres and terrible atrocities that are going on. I think they will be able to engage with the content maybe more sympathetically and not be so easily put off if they're also learning in the process, and we can explain how we've arrived at this point in our history by the use of all those sort of gadgets that I'm talking about. And I'd really like to see a lot more of that. And of course, a lot more people being given the opportunity to tell their own stories, people on the ground, people in communities. I think there's always going to be a place for a reporter, because someone's got to make sense of it and draw in the elements together. But I hope going forward, international journalism will be much more of a team sport. I think that's going to be great fun.
Yeah, that's kind of all the questions I had for you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Kay, and to give my love to City University Journalism School. It was really a fabulous year, and I look back on it with such fond memories.